supposed to screw that up. Hello everyone, Ron here from L.T.L Tutoring Central, and I am here talking about personification. It is a literary device, sometimes called a poetic device or figurative language. There's lots of them. There's simile and metaphor and hyperbole and onomatopoeia, etc., etc. But this time around, I'm talking about personification. Do you know what personification is? There's a little bit of a clue in the name, but I'm going to define it in just a moment. Before I jump into the core of the video, if you don't mind pushing that subscribe button, that helps the channel a lot. If you want to help some more, check in the description. There's a way to donate to the channel. Also commenting, asking questions, providing information, etc. That all helps the algorithm and helps me to keep the channel going as well. Of course, you can check out the website, L.T.L Tutoring Central. There'll be links in the description to the website and also to a blog where there's going to be some more information about personification. I'm very interested in getting into it. I'm going to give you a few little examples, but it's used a lot more than you might think. That's the case with most figurative language. We think of them only as literary devices, but they actually sneak into academic writing. They get into everywhere. Now, when you're using them, if you're the writer, you have to be a little bit careful because some of them shouldn't really be used too much in academic writing, but others have become so conventional that they are accepted in academic writing, and you will see them in magazine articles and even essays and other places where you might not think they would be. So look out for personification. Once we've gone through this video, you can look in your own reading. You're going to find that more in fiction literature or writing, but when you're reading, look out for some figurative devices. It makes it a little bit more exciting. And why use things like personification? Well, because it adds color and it gives us a clear vision of what the author is expressing. And the more you know about some of these things, and it's not so important unless you're studying it to remember all the terms and definitions, but it's good to get an idea of them so that you're watching out for them, you're looking for them, and you think, wow, that was a really good metaphor, or that's a really good example of personification. And it just helps you to engage even more in what you're reading and appreciate it even more and when you're looking out for these things. All right, I'm sure you've hit that subscribe button by now. Let's jump into personification. First off, a bit of a definition of personification. Personification is a figure of speech in which inanimate objects, abstract ideas, or animals are given human characteristics or endowed with life. We're going to talk a little bit more about the specifics of personification at the end of this slideshow. Here's a few basic examples of personification. The trees sighed under the blustery wind. Well, here the trees are being personified. Trees don't actually sigh. The wind is just blowing through the branches and the leaves. It makes noises, but it's not really sighing. A person can sigh, but a tree doesn't really sigh. Or the cookies kept calling my name. Well, you might think that because you may be hungry and you really, really want to have those cookies, even though maybe you think, maybe I shouldn't have those cookies. But they're not actually calling your name. That's something that a person could do, but not a cookie. So cookies are being personified here or given human characteristics. And finally, here we have birds welcomed the spring with their sweet calls. Now, you might think this doesn't really sound like personification, but birds don't really welcome the spring. Birds, during the spring, often you'll have a lot more birds coming back if you live in an area like I do where you have a cold, wintry, snowy winter. In the springtime, there's a more variety of birds, and the warmer weather, they're out chirping and singing, but they're not really welcoming the spring. Welcoming is a human characteristic, so the birds are being personified in this case. Now I have a couple of sort of famous examples, although they might not be well known. I tried to pick some that aren't the norm, aren't the ones that you find all the time. And this is from Rosario Castellano's poem, The Empty House. And this is only a part of the poem. This is not the whole poem. Gray adolescence with vocation of shadow, with destiny of death. The stairway sleeps, the house which knew not how to hold you crumbles. So here we have a stairway that's being personified because stairways don't really sleep, and a house that's being personified because a house cannot know anything, and it cannot not know anything. So in this case, we're having throughout the poem, it's actually the house that's being personified, and a stairway is part of the house. But you could say there's a couple of personifications happening in this stanza of the poem. Here's another famous example from Irving Layton's poem, Song for Naomi. What is the wind in the fair grass saying, like a verse near the water? Saviors that over all things have power, make time himself grow kind, and kinder that sought her, my little daughter. This is not the whole poem either, it's just one stanza from the poem. However, we have personification of the wind. What is the wind in the fair grass saying? Well, wind is not saying anything. When the wind goes through certain areas, it makes a sound that we can hear, but it's not talking, it's not saying anything. So here the wind is being personified, given human qualities or characteristics. And then a little further down, make time himself grow kind. Well, time, and it is capitalized in the poem, so that's why it's capitalized here, because that in itself is a kind of personification almost. You're giving it a name, like a person, like John or Mary. But the real personification here is that time cannot grow kind. It can't grow evil either. It just is. It just passes by. It doesn't have feelings. So it's being personified here. And kinder, that sought her. Well, time didn't seek anyone out either, not literally, not really, but a person could. So again, time is being personified in this poem, Song for Naomi. Both the poems that we looked at, if you want to look them up, they're both excellent poems. Maybe I'll cover them at some point on the YouTube channel. Let me know what poems you like and what poems you might want me to look into and discuss on the channel. Now this is the point that I mentioned earlier where I was going to become a little bit more specific in defining personification, because there is another literary device, sometimes called a poetic device or literary language, anthropomorphism, and it's similar to personification. In fact, the terms are often used as synonyms, and it's not really a problem when we're speaking colloquially. Basically, they are both giving human qualities to non-human entities, let's say. But personification is, in its more technical way, is figurative, and it's generally brief. It's an expression. It's a way of clarifying or getting the reader to envision whatever's being described more clearly. Sometimes to give it a sense of feeling or emotion as well. Anthropomorphism is very similar. It does all of those things, but it allows non-human things to display literal human traits and act as a human. In other words, and it's generally happens over a much longer period of time. So think of Mickey Mouse. Think of most animated movies or stories and books where animals or trees or other entities are acting as a human. They're walking, they're talking, they're driving cars, they're going to their job. So it's much more than just a brief personification. It's sort of like an extended personification, if you like. And they're displaying literal human traits rather than just, as an earlier example, the the tree sighing, or if you think of a teapot whistling, well, it makes a sound, but it doesn't whistle like a human. So in a way, that's a personification. But with anthropomorphism, it's more complete and it's longer. There you have it, a little bit of information about personification. Of course, there's a lot more examples than the few that I gave you. If you look up personification, you'll find loads and loads of sort of everyday expressions that you might not recognize are examples of personification, and anthropomorphism as well. And as I say, often the terms are used interchangeably. There is a technical difference. If you're studying literature, you might need to be a bit more careful with that. But in general, everyday conversation, it's not so critical as long as you are clear what you're discussing with the person. They'll understand what you mean by either expression, or you can explain it anyway now that you know the difference between them. But personification is generally short, a sentence, a phrase that gives human characteristics to a non-human thing, whereas anthropomorphism is generally much longer. And as I say, just think of animated videos or books where animals or other lamps or trees are talking and walking and expressing, and that's the difference. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope it gave you a little bit of information. Let me know what your favorite examples of personification are. I gave you a couple of literary examples, and I gave you a few just general examples, but there are so many more out there. So let me know what your favorite personification is. Let me know what your favorite literary device is as well. I will be doing more videos on specific literary devices in the future, and so you can let me know what your favorites are, and maybe I'll do those ones first. We'll see how it goes. It is Ron from L.T.L Tutoring Central. Keep learning, keep having fun. Bye bye for now.